welcome dear viewers. Welcome to this edition of the Reverts Show. Today we'll be discussing the plight of the reverts and why perhaps so many reverts stop practicing the religion of Islam. I have on the end Kate Evans. She has been a Muslim just 5 months. On my left I have Dr. Leon Musavi, who's a researcher at the University of Liverpool, and he specialises in the lives of British Muslim reverts and their experiences. I have Khalil Fuad. He has been a Muslim just almost 25 years now. And on the end here, we have Susan Baig, who's been a Muslim just over a year. On the show today, we are going to discuss the plight of the reverts. In the UK, there's estimated around 60,000 Muslim converts or reverts. It's also estimated that around 5,000 British people revert to the religion of Islam every year. However, it seems from anecdotal evidence that many of these Muslims actually turn away from the religion, stop practicing the faith of Islam. So on the show, we'd like to debate the question, why do so many of the reverts turn back? And it's difficult to estimate the figures, but it's perhaps at least 50% and up to 3/4 of reverts. We'll start with Leon. Why do you think so many reverts turn back?
Well, I think when we ask the question, why do so many people convert to Islam, there's first of all no one reason or no one route into Islam. And I think the same can be said with regards to why do so many people actually decide that they don't want to be a Muslim. There's no one reason or one route that applies to those people who decide to leave Islam. I think some people who convert to Islam, they've done so for less sincere reasons than other Muslim converts. There are people who convert to Islam because of the sake of a relationship, for example. So when those people are leaving Islam, often it's because the relationship has come to an end. But there are other people who were more sincere in their conversion. But I think the thing that makes them eventually abandon Islam is because often they have very negative experiences with the Muslim community. And hopefully we'll speak, as the programme progresses, about the different types of negative experiences. But for example, some things can relate to cultural expectations that are not really part of Islam that might be put onto reverts. Some things can relate to expectations of a revert to be, a kind of saviour of the community. That might mean that they have pressure put on them to develop in a very rapid way. And there are other things to do with people sort of grappling for converts from a kind of sectarian perspective and forcing particular ideas onto a convert that they maybe don't understand or they're not really prepared for. So I think these are some of the reasons, some of the main important reasons that originate from negative experiences with the Muslim community that can lead to some Muslim converts feeling that they can no longer continue practicing Islam.
Yeah. Khalil, you've been a Muslim almost 25 years now and you're still practicing religion. What has been your experience? Have you experienced these negative experiences? Have you seen others? What can you say based on what you've seen?
Yes, I mean, I can honestly say that I've seen, negative results and positive results seen both of those things happen. And I've got many friends who have taken a Shahada who are not necessarily practicing anymore, and have others who are practicing, but they practice in secret or as solo by themselves. They have their relationship with God, with Allah, and they maintain that relationship and intimacy, but they might not frequent mosques or Islamic centers, or might not even look to the eye to be Muslim unless you know what to look for. Some of the other kind of downsides are a lot of what Dr. Leon Musawi has mentioned. In my experience, I've seen it is one of the strong things is the cultural. It is the cultural side of things, and the fact that when many people take their Shahada, their families are not Muslim, and a lot of the family members don't necessarily accept it or can relate to it, or they think their child or their sibling is going through some type of fad or some other thing like this. So you don't have the support mechanism of the family and the extended family. So you kind of feel alone at times. When you take your Shahada, you're also looking to become part of this new global family. You're trying to be part of of a people that you read about in the Quran and you read about in the Hadith are people who would put you sometimes first before themselves and so on. And you may initially find this in that honeymoon period, and then after a while that seems to fade. And whereas other people who may be born into Islam have their families, have their cultures, have their language, have historical links that go back hundreds of years, many new Muslims don't have that. And one other thing that happens is, we're talking about Britain, and there is a British identity for people who are British, okay? Yes, it differs depending on where you go in the country, but there is still a underlying thread, okay? And Islamically, it's as if Islam itself doesn't have a British identity. If you look at Christianity, Christianity is a Middle Eastern religion, but nobody in Britain thinks it's a Middle Eastern religion. It's a British, Christianity is Christianity.
Yeah.
In England, there's a Church of England, there's all of this stuff. This is a major problem because when people become Muslim, they're bringing a new energy, a new light. Many people say that they chose Islam, and others after a while start to look and say, actually, it's as if I've been chosen, I've been called to something, and I have said yes, and I've pursued it. When that happens, the next thing you want is to be able to have an environment to actualize this actual thing, realize this in its truthful sense. And that's where there can be a problem, because you may not feel included, you may not feel a complete part of a group, and that's a struggle, and that causes a lot of suffering as well.
Thank you, Khalil. Sue, you've only been a Muslim a year. Have you experienced any of these things that Khalil talks about in this early phase of your reversion journey?
Certainly the social side and the inclusion and the identity, just knowing who to identify with and which groups to join. I have a Pakistani family, so in some ways I would join a Pakistani culture and the groups there, but then I face difficulties with language. I can join the revert groups, but then I face difficulties because they're predominantly Iranian, and again there's some differences there between the cultural aspects. I could just be me, practicing being a Muslim at home, but then some people see that that's or give judgment that that's not doing my full purpose. I should be going out there, I should be joining communities, I should be going to lectures. So there's lots of pressure from different aspects, knowing quite how to act and quite where I belong.
Kate, the same question to you. You've only been a Muslim 5 months. Have you experienced any of these things?
Yes, I have. I wouldn't say they're negative things. I would say all these issues have made me question myself a lot and question Islam and question the Muslims around me, and I think that's very positive. And I think having these discussions is very positive. And these come about because we all find ourselves in some level of conflict. So yes, I have had these issues, and it's not that I don't feel included in Muslim communities. I think they're incredibly inclusive in terms of inviting me here and feeding me, and very kind and generous. But we are different. My needs are different. What I came to Islam very much like what Dr. Masuvi was saying, not for a relationship, when I came, I was definitely called in some way to a religion that I find quite threatening at times. I find the male aspect of it quite challenging as a woman. So I'd say my issues are very much at present. The thing that I'm banging up against with Islam is gender issues. I guess that would be my
Interesting. Leon, it sounds like that there is an issue that of support for reverts, and that the mainstream cultural communities, you could call them, are not providing their support. Do you think that, in your experience speaking to reverts all across the country for your research, do reverts have different needs to born Muslims?
I think when it comes to conversion to Islam, it's obviously a massive undertaking. When someone decides to convert to Islam as a religion, which is very strongly demonized in the media, which many people don't understand, the first thing that often happens, not always, but often happens, is that they often lose their family, or they lose the support and the love of their family, and maybe their friends and colleagues as well. And so because of that, as we've already heard, a lot of reverts are looking for and expecting, and rightly so, from an Islamic perspective, are expecting the Muslim community to step in and to support them and to be there for them. And, there are some very sincere lifelong Muslims who work very hard to accommodate Muslim converts, to assist them and to teach them about Islam. And in fact, the reason there is a lot of people who've converted to Islam is because there are these people in the Muslim community who often show good character and reach out to people who are not Muslim who eventually convert to Islam. But these people are a rare find, and nationally, the Muslim community, definitely neglects Muslim converts. But not only Muslim converts, the Muslim community neglects themselves. The Muslim community is, if we're honest, it has lots of weaknesses, lots of shortcomings, and I think a lot of reverts have to deal with that reality check when they try to enter the Muslim community and they realise that what they've been reading about in terms of Islamic teachings and how inspiring Islam is, and all these great Islamic figures that have existed throughout history, these people are the best of the best, and sadly the Muslim community today don't really reflect, say, prophetic character and morals in the way that we would hope that they do. So definitely as a Muslim community we need to think more about the provision that's provided for Muslim converts, because the journey is such a big undertaking and it does require support, I think.
Yeah. Khalil, what has been your experience with the Muslim community?
That is a massive question.
In terms of support, because there clearly is a need for an alternative social network. Majority reverts lose their family or become distanced from them. What has been your experience, perhaps with your family and with the Muslim organisations, the communities, the group centres that you've engaged with?
I think I'd like to first speak about the perception that a new Muslim or somebody who's interested in Islam, the perception they have of Muslims and what Islam is, if you're considering entering or accepting this path. The expectation and the view you have is a glorious one, a wonderful, beautiful expectation, and it's a correct expectation to have. The problem that people face isn't about Islam. It isn't about Allah. It's not about the Prophet. It's not about the Quran. It's not about what's revealed. One of my teachers has said the problem isn't what Muslims have done wrong, it's what they're not doing right. That's the problem. So you have a situation that you read all of these things and you know in your heart it's true and good for you. But then you go seeking that, and the dynamics of families and communities and cultures and environments and outside pressures and economics. And look, we're living in Britain right now when isolationism is on the rise everywhere. There is, I grew up at a time when neighbourhoods really were neighbourhoods, at least in London, a neighbour could tell you off and you're not going to say a bad word to that neighbour because they're going to tell your mum and dad. And, so there's watchfulness. People police themselves. There was balance and more inclusion, and people knew each other more. Now we're living in a time where a lot of people, you buy a home, it's an investment, you move into an area, you don't necessarily know your neighbours, and so on and so forth. A lot more people are by themselves. The fabric of Islam is unific. It's saying those of you who come into this part, whether you are brothers and sisters in Islam, if you're not, then you're brothers and sisters in humanity and in existence. And equal love and concern and caring and acceptance should be there for all humans.
Yeah.
We speak about tolerance. We hear Britain is a tolerant country. Who the hell wants to be tolerated? I don't want to be tolerated and put up with me. I want to be accepted. And I want to be accepted for the qualities I have. And I want to then be able to be included with those qualities. That's any human, all right? And so now we look at Muslims and we look at how Muslims are living or existing in today's Britain. We have a lot of media, you know, again, the finger of accusation is pointed at the Muslims, right? Demonization, even if they're saying, oh, they're over in the Middle East or they're over there, look what they're doing. No. The reality is that to the average British person watching that, they don't think about that's happening over there. They think about the Muslims who are here. And they start to have it coloured with this. But then you ask them, do you have any Muslim friends or colleagues? Yeah, I do. Do they seem anything like these crazy people who are chopping heads off and doing all these bad things? They're like, no, they're some of the best people I know. And like, right. How come the people you actually know who you like as Muslims are less, you know, how could I put it? The view of the crazy Muslim is a stronger, more powerful view than the person you personally know who's a good person.
Yeah.
So we're up against all of these different things, and a lot of Islamic people themselves are in a state of confusion, fear, levels of even distrust, not knowing where to step, how to step in the right way. And I personally think that some of this has to be addressed by the knowledgeable, by the leaders, by the so-called imams of the mosque and so on and so forth. And I think that since 9/11 and the extreme heat that's been happening, I think that a lot of those leaders have been found in some cases wanting, and an inability to address the fears and needs of the people, Muslim and non-Muslim, to be able to show them the reality of what this revelation is and to help them in their relationship with God, will put them at ease and will put non-Muslim people at ease and recognize actually whether you are of faith or not of faith, we are people all together and we live together. I think there is the solution, and also there are the seeds of the problem.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some issues in the community themselves, the
Absolutely.
cultural communities. They're in a state of confusion, crisis perhaps, lack of leadership. How have your very idealistic revert expectations based upon the Quran and the Sunnah, how have they how do they compare with what you've actually experienced in the mosques? You know, what did you expect from the Muslim community when you became Muslim, and how has that not been met?
Well, I grew up in a church environment, right? I mean, I had to go to church every Sunday till I was 14 when I could say, no, I don't want to go no more. And my mum and dad left me. I was like, wow. But that 14 years shaped me in a big way, okay? So I grew up in an environment where I can go to church and there's all of these people and they all know me and I know all of them. They all accept me and I accept them. They love me and I love them. I grew up with that. I grew up in a neighborhood where there was love amongst them. I become Muslim and I'm looking for that same love and I find it. But after a while, you start to see that maybe sometimes that love is conditional, right? Are you the right age? Are you the right, do you think in that right way? Are you the right skin color? Depending on where you go, these things become issues. And I've found that at the same time, even when there's these problems, you are always going to be able to find that echo of Allah's love and generosity and kindness manifested in people, in every environment, in all the different mosques, you find those people. And I do believe that it is out of that love that Allah brings the hearts together, the like-minded together. If you remain open and if you seek those type of people, you will find those type of people. It just means you have to maybe work a bit harder to find them. Sometimes in order to find something wonderful, you have to go through some messy things, you know?
Yeah. Can you give any examples of actual anecdotes, experiences you've had that have shown where you've been let down and you've been disappointed with the Muslim community?
In my first year as a Muslim, I'll give this one example. My first year as a Muslim, a lot of us took our Shahada within a month, and we were from the same kind of crew of, like, hip-hop crew of people who used to hang out together, right? We all took our Shahada, many of us, 25, 30 of us within a month, in the late 80s. I remember once in my first year going to Central Mosque in London, and, you know, there was the Jum'ah, and there's all these people, and it's multicultural and everything wonderful. And you come outside, you're shaking hands with everyone, and people are just salaming you, and you don't know them, it's good. And, you know, we are like, you know, there's about 7 of us, like, you know, like brothers standing up together, we just new Muslims. And this man came along, middle-aged man, and so he shakes a hand, shakes one of our hands, and pats us on the head. Salam alaikum Bilal. Shake another hand. Salam alaikum Bilal. Shake another hand. Salam alaikum Bilal. You know, this is a thing where we're like, okay, you know, to most people in Islam, or to some people who don't know much of history and stuff, Bilal is the only black person in the whole history of Islam, okay? So this guy has come along and called us all Bilals and patted us on our heads like children. It's very condescending, and we was in a bit of a shock. But we understand he doesn't represent Islam. He may well be trying to be inclusive, but this is how he sees the world.
Yeah.
So we looked on him as an anomaly kind of thing. But that experience, I've never forgotten it. And I will never allow something like that to happen again. I will correct a person who does that again. So I believe that there is mercy of God in every situation. And I have to take from that situation a mercy, which is the next time something like that happens, help that person to not do that again to somebody else. That's one example that might be looked at as a small little thing. But to some brothers, they wanted to smack him. You see what I mean?
Yes, yes.
And he might not have been trying to be rude. Then again, he may have been. But we have to have an expectation, a best expectation from someone's actions, and be understanding and forgiving.
Absolutely.
That's another lesson that we learned from such a thing.
And it's a blessing that you knew the correct behaviour, the correct akhlaq. Sue, you obviously come from a different racial background, so a white British person. What has been your experience engaging with the mainstream Muslim community?
I think it's I've tried to make a conscious decision about who I spend time with now. I was very lucky that when I was first learning about Islam, I was amongst a really fantastic community, and I wasn't exploring Islam at that time. So everything I learnt from them and everything they showed me about Islam was not for any other reason. It was completely genuine and pure Islam. But I think that built my expectations up. So when I started to get to know some other communities back in London, I was suddenly very shocked by some of the things that I saw. They sound silly things, but all the values that I'd learned that Islam represents, they weren't being represented in the mosques. So there was gossiping, there was materialistic sides, there was the status, there was some people not speaking to others because their son wasn't at the right age for marriage. It was all of the things you think, wow, this is what I've moved away from. So I found myself very disappointed, and I used to come back frustrated and complaining. And it was only then that I realised I could only do my best or be my best if I surround myself with people that I want to be like. So I tried different mosques, I tried different communities, and I stuck to the ones that I felt comfortable with, and the people that I felt comfortable with. And there's still times that I need to be around people that feel like that and get me frustrated. But in some ways, I see it as a way of reminding myself of how easy it is to take things for granted. And I think I've experienced many maybe born Muslims that have taken things for granted, and others that see things as a new blessing every day. So it's just surrounding myself with those people.
Good. Kate, you haven't been a Muslim long. What's been your initial reaction to the Muslim community? How are you finding things?
I think, like what Khalil said, there's a honeymoon period, where you sort of, well, for me, I bowled into the mosques and people were I think they couldn't believe that I just sort of shown up and barged my way in. And people were really sweet and so kind and very helpful and very compassionate. That was my first reaction. Maybe because I went in there with a very open heart. I was, again, received by people with a very open heart. So that was great. And I still feel that way. I didn't try, and I'm not consciously trying to fit in with a Muslim society. I mean, that's not my thing. And I've lived all over the world. I've lived since a small child. I've always been the foreigner. I lived in India. I was the only white person in the whole school. I've lived everywhere, so I know I'm a little bit of a chameleon. I mean, I can fit in. I can act. I can do that. I don't have a problem with that. I think. Again, coming back to the same issue, and it's just an issue that's, for me at the moment, is the issue of being a woman, being a Muslim woman, and I don't wear the hijab in my day-to-day life. I will wear it if I am asked to wear it, if someone wants me in their house to wear it, at cultural centres, at mosques, obviously. I have reasons why, very valid reasons. And, this symbol of Islam for a woman is a very incendiary issue out of the Muslim world for everybody. There are women who have their hijabs pulled off by people who don't want them to wear it, and then there are women who are told, if you don't wear the hijab, you're really not a proper Muslim woman. So this hijab, for me, as a woman, represents a vast topic, and I'm sort of struggling with that. So that would be my issue. And so this has come about through Islamic study and through, explain to me where in the Quran and what the verses are about hijab and what does it mean and what is the hijab for the man, what is the hijab for the woman. All of this is, and I believe very strongly that this is a huge issue in the West, and that Islam's greatest foe and enemy is the Western woman, because Western women, generally speaking, who are educated and told that we must excel and we must compete with, we must compete with men, or, because we have to in the workplace, but we also have to have children, we also have to, we have to do everything. That is the expectation of a woman in the West, is that she excels in her job, she's very successful, she makes very good money, often more than men, brings up the children, inspires the children, makes sure the dinner's cooked, keeps the house looking good, takes the kids on holiday. This is what people in the West aspire to. But so how do we fit all this together?
Do you feel there's a conflict between your Muslim identity and your British identity?
Yes, absolutely. As it's presented to me, absolutely. And I can only be true to myself and true to my connection to God as I feel seen by God, to say, until this issue in me is clear, I will not be wearing the hijab, because it's a symbol of, the first thing anyone knows when they look at me is I'm Muslim. It's not you're a woman who does a job or you're good at you. And also the world that I'm in is often the world of media, of human rights. There are human rights organisations, many of them are run by women, who work in countries where Muslim women are not being very well treated at all. Let's not even go there or discuss it. So it's an issue. And why should I be a spokesperson? After 5 months of conversion, when I'm very confused, this says everything, and it invites people to criticize me, ask me questions that I don't want to answer or can't answer. You know, it's a tall order. So for men, Muslim men, to say to women, get on that hijab and get on with your life, to me is a very, this drives me nuts. So that's my issue.
This issue of hijab is obviously very potent these days with the media representation of Muslim women. How did you cope with this? Clearly you're wearing a hijab, Sue. What's been your experience? How have you felt?
I want to pick up on one of the points that you said there, Kate, because I think that's very true. I think it's a thing about when you convert, suddenly you're expected to know everything and do everything right and have answers to everything. So from a female point of view, putting that hijab on is that time. So suddenly you're under an awful lot of pressure to do everything right. And for me, I think what helped was to I actually started learning and doing some of the practical sides of Islam before I converted. So I didn't face that immediate pressure of suddenly putting the hijab on and needing answers that I didn't have. So that certainly helped me, but it is a big issue at work. I think everything that you strive to do as a professional woman in work in the UK, you're already under so many different pressures, the equality about how you conduct yourself, how aggressive you are, how manly you are, how you compete against the male leaders in companies. And to have the hijab as an extra layer on top of that, it just adds more complications.
Yeah.
So you're right, you're treated in a completely different way. You're treated as maybe the token Muslim. Sometimes you're expected that you were given positions or roles because they have to do it for equality's sake. It's it brings in so many different elements.
Can I add something?
Yes, please go on, Khalil.
Sometimes we have to go back and look. In the Prophet's time in Mecca, 1400 years ago, right? Mecca was a patriarchal society. Women were the spoils of raids, for example. Do you understand what I mean? They were not valued equally at all, okay? Unless you were the daughter or the wife of powerful people or a powerful tribe, you're less than a second-class citizen. And we have to understand that through the revelation over the period of years, that through that revelation of the Quran and the Prophet, it's trying to change people. They're trying to bring about an equality and a balance. This is very important for people to understand, because when people in modern times or hundreds of years ago, when they read the Quran, sometimes they don't try to take it out of its time and put it now.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? They literally try to imitate that time and the attitudes of that time, where you can see through the Quran and the Prophet's words, that time was being changed. There was an evolution going on, okay? An amazing evolution that affected the whole planet till this day. So I want to say about the hijab is that, just like what Kate was saying, it's like walking down the street with this massive flag banner you're waving. You see the hijab from miles away, all right? And the biggest problem I think that people who wear hijab have to deal with, if they're having any difficulty, is other people's assumptions and presumptions. And you can't win against other people's assumptions. You can only, if you have the ability to change it and give them what the reality is, then they can change their minds or something. But otherwise, there's billions of pounds worth of free advertising on the news to be anti-hijab or anti-Islamic, or Muslim women are oppressed. And the thing is, there are other women around the world who are also oppressed. by the men of the society, but the emphasis on them is not so much. Maybe because their identity is not so clear as what the hijab shows to the world. So one of the things is that there's a lot of pressure on women to wear hijab, and some to wear it immediately, and so on and so forth. But when you read the Quran, whenever Allah speaks of the hijab, Allah speaks of, He speaks of the mu'minas, okay? He's speaking of those women who have reached a level of conviction, of such faith and conviction and certainty. And Allah addresses them concerning the hijab. I believe Allah says, "Oh, Muslim women, wear it." So we have to understand that even putting a hijab on, there's a journey. There's also the inner hijab. There's that journey that takes place within one's own self. When we look at the male hijab, all right? The male hijab is more about the fact that the man can emit a lot of power or emotion or influence and things like this. And even on a sexual level, okay, the man can be quite dominating or, pushing out, The male hijab is containment. Lower the gaze, right? This is what the Quran says, to lower your gaze. This is talking about containment, about respect, about honor in your behavior and how you address women and other people. This is the male hijab. But unfortunately, as well, we see a lot of men and a lot of the images that we see, whether it's the movies and TV, whether it's through fashion, whatever it is, whether it's just being a lad, it's like you're the go-getter, go and get that girl, go and do that, This is the opposite of the hijab. And it affects Muslim men too. Sometimes these Muslim men decide they're going to be domineering, or they're going to dominate the women. You got to wear this, you got to do this, This is them not doing that hijab as well, and it causes suffering as well, and it causes heartache.
Khalil, there's clearly, within all the reverts, there's a different understanding of Islam within the revert community and the cultural community. How do you think this contradiction arises, the way you perceive Islam and the way they perceive Islam?
Well, I think, first of all, every human being, every individual is going to perceive it slightly different, because we are all going to be at slightly different phases and stages in our lives. We're going to have different experience throughout our lives, and every individual is an individual. We have our eyes and noses and mouths in the same place, more or less, but yet, of all the trillions of humans born, there's never been one that looks exactly the same. Those of us who are able-bodied with 2 legs, we all walk, but no human being has the same gait, none have the same fingerprints. Therefore, our experiences are going to be unique to us as well, and our conclusions are going to be unique to us as well. So whether somebody is born into the religion or has come and embraced the religion, they're always going to have a different thing, a different view. At the same time, there is underlying threads which are going to be the same if you open the door of your heart or your intellect to it, And I think one of the problems is why there might not seem to be so much unity or the same direction with the flow of people is where we have aspects of our own self, our own whims, our own willfulness, our own decision-making, our own acceptance or disregard. This is what gets in the way of that kind of purity, that pure road to that truth or realization. And because of the I in me, we're going to have these differences. Now, Kate and myself, we were speaking earlier, and one of the things that we spoke about was the fact that the Prophet has said, if you perceive somebody's wronged you, find 70 excuses for them, or make 70 excuses for them before you get to blame them. That is just forgiveness upon forgiveness upon forgiveness upon letting it go, whatever this thing's been done. If Muslims practice that, we would have a very harmonious group of people who would be an influence, a positive influence on other people. It's like you are the best of people who encourage goodness on others and who push away the badness and the harm You are the best of people on the planet. So, you see, when there's too much of me in it,
Yeah.
if I'm angered, if I'm this is where we're going to have that conflict, that difference, that problem.
Can you see any commonalities between the behaviour of the born Muslims, and can you think of any reasons why they behave like that? Because clearly reverts are having a shared experience. Is there something common to the cultural communities that's causing them to clash in some sense with the reverts?
It's really difficult to say yes to that, just because of the variety of people.
Yeah.
I think it would be wrong of me to say, yes, it's this and it's that.
Yeah.
Because within every family and every group,
Yeah.
and every cultural group or language group or ethnicity, there is untold variety.
Yeah.
The thing is, we have to seek those people who are good for us. It's back to making an effort. It's back to feeling that I want to find them. You know what I mean?
As a revert, how do you discern that you are rightly guided, that you are engaging with the right people? Because you are alone on this journey, and perhaps others may feel that they are behaving in the right way when they're...
That's another thing. You may be a Muslim recent, you may have just become a Muslim, you may be just about to become a Muslim. Your level of trust in people is humongous. Optimism, like, boundless. And I think that's because you're also really open to God. And that openness brings a level of optimism, and you know what I mean? So if you've been a Muslim a bit longer, then you might become a bit more discerning. Yeah?
Yeah.
And then maybe a bit longer, you know, you have different, as the times go on, you have different feelings. I don't know how to fully answer that, but I would say that we have to encourage each other to be optimistic, to have the best expectation of God, from God. We mustn't allow other people's issues to damage us or tarnish our hearts. This is a jihad, I think, actually. It's a big struggle. But I think that the more people that come to that realization or find each other, the struggle becomes easier, because you have more of you who are seeking that same openness.
Thank you, Khalil. It's very interesting. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Assalamu alaikum.